Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We're glad you are with us, as we always are, every Monday through Friday. Program drops at midnight. Actually, it's midnight and 1 minute, to tell you the truth, on your favorite podcast platform. And, of course, you'll find us on places like iHeart, Amazon, and so many others. If you want to look at some of the podcast platforms we're on, just check out Catholic Audio Media, where you can also hear the program there. And our main podcast platform, our mother podcast platform, better way to put it, I suppose, is Podbean. And many people, we check our stats, listen to us through the Podbean app. So you can tune us in on iHeart, you can tune us on Amazon, Podbean, and so many others, Spotify, and so many others. So please subscribe and also comment. Comment's good too. Not only does it tell us what you're thinking, but it also helps our algorithm as well. So please consider that as well. We're speaking to all those who are out there. We have, a decent amount of people listening every month, so that's really cool. So in any case, we're going to finish our interview with Dr. Tracey Rowland today. Of course, we've been interviewing her about Cardinal Pell. And the name of the book is Remembering George Cardinal Pell, Recollections of a Great Man of the Church. Comes to us from Ignatius Press. And, of course, you can find it on all your favorite bookstore platforms and in the brick-and-mortar stores that you're looking for. So, in any case, and this is various reflections from people from all over the world. Obviously many from Australia, many from other parts of the world, including, of course, this is not a complete list, obviously, but Americans, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, and, of course, George Weigel. So, interesting book to check out and people's reflections on Cardinal Pell. In the meantime, we want to first begin talking about our first reading, which we always do. And this, again, comes to us from Deuteronomy. This is a powerful story. I know I say that about every story, and that's one of the things I've found by doing these reflections, which I've been doing for years, mostly on the first reading. And just every one of them are really powerful. Well, here we have the story of the death of Moses. This is one of the things that I said to you is it was once believed that the Torah was written by Moses, including in Deuteronomy, the death of Moses. But later they found out that the Torah was actually put together first through these oral stories, and then eventually they were written down, and eventually people put them all together, and that's what happened. Now, the stories may have their origin in Moses without question, but we look at that and see the story. So here we have the death of Moses, but there's an important lesson here, because you can look at this and go, well, Moses, led the people. He went through all this trouble. He even came to a point where he said to the Lord, just kill me now. I'm done. And went through all this difficulty. And after all that, because of one incident, which is the water incident, because of one incident at Meribah, he is not allowed into the promised land. Well, let's look at it from a whole different perspective. Remember, Moses was one of the two on the Transfiguration, which we celebrated last week. What is the real promised land? And that, of course, is heaven. And granted, we do not believe that Moses went to heaven right away, because remember, heaven was closed because of Adam and Eve, and the gates were reopened when Jesus died on the cross. And so that's one of the things we remember. But that's the true promised land, and that's the promised land of all of us. When we look at the story from the Torah, especially Exodus and also Deuteronomy, of this journey to the promised land, it's to be, at that time, it was to be a story of the journey to the promised land. In our time, it's called to be a lesson of our journey to the promised land. So it's an important message that is there. Now, there's something else there as well. Moses is succeeded by Joshua. This is so key. Moses is succeeded by Joshua. Remember, Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, you know that famous song. Well, that's the Joshua. There was some old joke, I can't remember it exactly, something like, who were Joshua's parents? He didn't have any because he was the son of Nun. You see, that was the name of his father, Nun. So, Hebrew name. So, you know what they say, if you have to explain the joke, it really didn't work. Yeah, I know. But in any case, Joshua was the son of Nun. There was an old joke about that. But in any case, you have the story of Joshua now taking over for Moses. But there's an interesting little aspect in there. And that is that Moses lays hands on Joshua. Now, what I mean that is in the religious term. You know, in the secular term, he laid hands on him. Oh, really? Did he get arrested for assault? No, but he made it very clear not to do that again. Because lay hands in the secular world means to beat someone up. Obviously, that's not what it means. Laying hands is an ancient, we can go all the way back to this and probably further. Laying hands is an ancient term meaning that one is passing the Spirit of God onto another. It's used today in ordinations, obviously in consecrations of bishops, which is the succession of the bishops. It's also part of the charismatic renewal, that whole laying hands. And so when we look at that whole laying of hands on others and doing that laying of hands, this is an ancient symbol, and as we see, or an ancient move, an ancient gesture, there's the word I was looking for, and it brings us to have a full understanding of just how powerful that is. By his laying his hands on Joshua, now the Spirit of the Lord falls on Joshua, and Joshua continues the mission of Moses, leading people into the promised land. But do keep this in mind. And remember what I said earlier in the week. And this is so true. I've always wanted to say this on one of these TV shows when they turn around and say, well, you know, Christians don't believe in evolution. No, Catholics do. You need to understand through a cosmological reality, through cosmology, you need to understand that the whole aspect of the Jews, if you're not going to fully understand the mission of the Jews, if you don't understand this, the whole aspect of the Jews, their whole mission, when seen through cosmology, is that the wisdom of God enters into human development. And that's what the Jews do. They become a vessel for the wisdom of God. And it becomes the source of Jesus coming to the earth. So this is very important. But if you look at it just as one more group of people and they're no different than anybody else, no, they're very different because the Lord has reached out to them and said, I choose you to be my vessel where I will inject my wisdom, and you will be the carriers of my wisdom throughout history. You will be the source of my wisdom injected into human reality. This is so important. So we see this aspect of Moses. Moses now is preparing to go to his next stage of reality, which for him would be what we would call limbo. A lot of people have, big questions about limbo. And limbo for centuries was taught as the place where unbaptized babies went. Church is still developing that doctrine today, but it was a place where people went as kind of let me use the term, a green room in preparation for going to heaven, because heaven was closed after the original sin, Adam and Eve. And why was heaven closed? Because with the reality of original sin and with this aspect of original sin, heaven was closed because humanity in sinfulness could not stand to be in the presence of God. If you understand this is so important to understand. God is pure love. And if you stand in the presence of God and you aren't ready yet, this is one of the great stories you see throughout the Old Testament, then this pure love will be intolerable and destructive to you. So that's the reason why, and that's the reason why Catholics believe in purgatory. That's the reason why you needed this transformation. You needed this green room, so to speak, until humanity was ready. And once humanity was ready to stand in the presence of God, then, which is after the death and resurrection of Jesus, then the gates of heaven open up. We're going to be back right after this with our interview, our final part of our interview with Dr. Tracey Rowland on Cardinal Pell. We'll be right back.
You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but we do have this intense division in some circles over the, and I had an experience where a reporter for Our Sunday Visitor, or I guess he's an independent reporter, has published in Our Sunday Visitor, so I'll put it that way, wrote on X that Pope Francis had banished people from their parishes. And I said, no, he didn't. And I said, explain to me, I think I said, pray tell how this happened. And that's what he said. He called the restriction of the Latin Mass as being banishing people from their parishes. And then I said, no, that's not exactly accurate. And I received this intense, this was all on X, nasty feedback. And I said, and actually the way it came to me is, if this is what you stand for, then I want nothing to do with you. And I don't know if that exists in Australia.
It does. I've been on the receiving end of it myself. I had a funny experience years ago.
Really?
When I was asked to give a paper in Rome on the evangelical or the evangelical value of the extraordinary form. That was the topic I was given. And so I gave a 21-page paper. It was an academic conference, and I gave 19 pages of argument of why the extraordinary form actually is good at teaching people theology. It's good at mediating the theology to people in a symbolic way. So it's 19 pages of argument pro the extraordinary form. And then I had 3 pages saying, but these are the problems that exist in some of the extraordinary form parishes. And I listed 3 problems. One, hostility to Vatican II generally is often an attitude that is found. Secondly, there's often a kind of extreme aestheticism, and it was Pope Benedict who actually used that word and said, people can just get totally hooked on the aesthetics, and sort of that becomes everything. And then almost as a kind of light-hearted observation, I said, and some people who go to these parishes or these masses, like they dress their women like they've just escaped from an Amish farm. And well, I don't know. I think I got, like hundreds of emails and comments like, because I have 7 children and don't take the contraceptive pill, I can't afford the latest fashions, And there was someone who actually wrote on the internet that Tracey Rowland thinks that it's acceptable to go to Mass in your bathing suit. Like it just got extreme. And the point I was really, really trying to make is that one pathology I see in some of these communities is that because they don't like the Novus Ordo and see themselves as standing for tradition, they end up wanting to foster everything that is seen to be traditional. Everything traditional becomes what they want to promote, and that sometimes includes, sort of attitudes toward women that I think have theologically more in common with the Mennonite communities than they do with Catholic theology. And by Catholic theology, I don't mean extreme feminist stuff. I mean, the ideas about the relationships between men and women, and the ontology, what's called the ontology of the feminine, which St. John Paul II promoted. And, he wrote a lot about that issue because it is a live issue in the church. And I don't think there is anything extreme about what he said.
Right.
But that's sort of my concern. My concern about the communities is not, they're saying this form of the Mass that's pre-1969 or whatever. That doesn't bother me at all. But the kinds of attitudes toward women which come through not all of those communities and not everyone in those communities. I have friends who go to the extraordinary form whose attitudes to women would be, for me, completely acceptable. That's all I wanted to convey in that paper, really, and the reaction was quite extreme, and the reaction could have been member of the International Theological Commission says that the extraordinary form actually has great educational value.
Yes, that's true.
They could have spun it like that, it could have been a victory for their position, but instead they sort of shot themselves in the foot and turned it into a big issue about my comments upon Amish dress styles.
Isn't that something? So again, just kind of understand this. So you have communities of the Amish in Australia.
Look, we might have a few, but we would have some Mennonite communities, but there's nothing like the numbers that you have in the United States.
Lancaster County.
But we are aware of.
Oh, okay.
The American communities, and I think that it's a case, I think, of people sort of being caught in a culture that's terribly hostile. Like, there's no doubt that the culture in which we live is at many levels hostile to Christianity, and so people then have to live in a countercultural way if they want to be practicing Catholics. Just to be a practicing Catholic makes you countercultural. and then people have to decide, well, how much of the modern culture do we accept? How much do we reject? And, we end up with some people sort of dressing like they've just walked off the set of Little House on the Prairie. And
It's true.
It's okay, that won't hurt their chances of salvation. If they want to do that, that's fine, but it puts other people like me off.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this is what Cardinal Pell foresaw.
Cardinal Pell's, attitude was, we want people to go to Mass, and we want them to go to a valid Mass, and if they want the extraordinary form, let them have it.
Right,
But he also wanted people to support the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. He wanted people to understand the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. And that's a problem with that is that there are different interpretations of the council, and often people in traditionalist communities latch on to the most liberal interpretations and say that is what Vatican II was about, and we're against that.
Right.
And Cardinal Pell would say, look, could you please read what St. John Paul II said, or could you please read what Pope Benedict said? Because both of those men were significant players at the council, and they say that the council was indeed thoroughly Christocentric. And if you read the documents with a Christocentric accent, you don't end up with heresy.
Right. And I think we are in a point. I'm 67 years old, so I've lived. When I was very young, I attended the Latin Mass because that's all that was there. There was no alternative, and I was there when they turned the altar around and everything was in English, and I've done that ever since. I've never been trained in the Latin Mass, and I've also been told by people who do go to the Latin Mass, there's nothing they hate more than a priest who's celebrating it and mispronounces all the Latin, which I explain is exactly what I would do if I did it, because I don't speak Latin.
Yes.
So I choose not to. But, I will admit, during that time, there was a lot of unusual stuff because people were trying to figure it out. And... what I keep hearing people say that they're standing up against clown masses. Well, I don't think I've ever seen a clown mass in my life. I got in trouble with a blogger down in Florida where I was at a parish that is the circus parish. In other words, it is where the circus performers live, and that's where they go to church when they're not on the road. And so... he thought I supported clown masses when I was explaining I support clowns going to Mass, which is a completely different thing. But there he is. He supports clown masses. No, I don't.
No.
And that's what happens. It's all this, as you say, this bad interpretation of what's being said, of what's happening. I now work in hospital ministry, but in my last parish, we had very traditional hymns and done with the organ, and for that reason, because people would come to me, the older people, my age and older, would say, what if we bring in the guitars? And I'd say the young people do not want the guitars anymore. They want the traditional music, and so that's what we'll stay with, and that's what we did.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Younger people love traditional music, and they love the silence of the extraordinary form because, of course, they live in this hyper-digital age where there's no silence. Your iPhone's pinging every 3 minutes or something, and they love the meditative quality of the extraordinary form.
That's true.
And there's also a lot of young couples say that if they go to the extraordinary form, their little children are better behaved because they walk into this environment where people are speaking a strange language and there's, incense and bells and the children are kind of a bit mesmerized by it. They're like, oh, this is really different, and they tend to behave better. And so I know some young couples who say, look, Vatican II's ancient history. It occurred in the 1960s. You know, I was born around the year 2000. You know, and they're not interested in Vatican II. They just think, oh well, the children will be better behaved, and it's quieter, and you know we get to kind of say a few prayers without spending our whole time wrangling children. So there's that phenomenon as well, and I think a lot of those people felt a bit miffed when the MOTU came out, because they just thought, well, you know, we're not against Vatican II. You know,
Right.
So it's complex. It's a multi-dimensional issue, and I think it's different in different countries. But I think it's similar in the United States and Australia. I think the sociological profiles are very similar. But then if you go to France, you know, it's said that, I don't know, I've never had this verified, but it is said that in France there are more people at extraordinary form masses on a Sunday than there are people at Novus Ordo masses. You know, and there I think also it's you know it's tied up with their love of tradition and the fact that, you know, the French Revolution was something horrendous for the Catholics of France, and they don't like revolutionary changes. You know, they don't like revolutionary attacks on tradition.
That's a good point. However, I remember my father telling me he was in France in World War II, and I think this would have been after the war. And he said that, you know, the priests would be they'd attended mass. The priests would be celebrating mass, and there were very, very few people there. Just mostly the American soldiers. So even back then, before all this, people were not going to church. Before, and that's the 1940s.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting.
Well, we've reached our time, but I want to say I greatly appreciated this discussion, and it really was fascinating. And obviously, we'll be talking about the book as I do. This will come out in about 4 parts, so before and after each part, I'll be talking about the book and where it can be found, and that is, of course, Remembering Cardinal Pell, coming to us, and you are the editor, of course, coming to us from Ignatius Press.
Yes, that's right. Good.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. And
thank you.
I guess in your case, have yourself a blessed day.
Exactly.
We're about to hit night here. Well, thank you so much. And that was a wonderful discussion with Dr. Tracey Rowland. She is the author or the editor of the book, Remembering George Cardinal Pell, from Ignatius Press, and you can find it at your favorite online or brick and mortar bookstore. Obviously, if they don't have it on the shelves, you can always ask for it and ask them to order it. And it was a great discussion. We really covered a lot because of Cardinal Pell's real interest in bringing the message of the church and getting people to go to Mass and everything else. So really fascinating. We'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you then. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out.
Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media.